Hello everyone. Today's video I thought we'd take a look at the other of the Pilatus PC-6s, and that is the nice passenger version. And I had all the nices on it because it's pretty nice. Let's get started. So first things first, climbing inside this aircraft. For those of you familiar with the cargo version of this, you're probably going, oh, so it's a lot like the cargo. Whoa, modern avionics. I was not expecting that. If you think that's cool, check it out, check it out. Not only that, but I have a chair that you can actually sit in, and if you look in the back seat, we actually have other chairs you can sit in, which is actually kind of neat because this is a pretty cool plane for those kind of purposes. So the big thing with this aircraft that makes it a little bit different than its cargo version is the avionics are a little different. And we have a couple different places where the switches are probably not where you expect it. And interestingly enough, we actually have an automatic pilot built into this version, which makes this one far more usable than the cargo version. Of course, I think the cargo version's cool, but that's just me. So let's go ahead and get this sucker going. First thing we want to check, though, is looking around. You can see it looks a little on the snowy side today. We're sitting up here in the Kamchatka Peninsula. This is as far eastern in Russia as you can possibly get. It's a little bit cold outside, so we're definitely going to have to take a look at the EOH for this one a little more carefully. So first things first, let's go ahead and get some things going. Popping my head over here, you can see you've got yourself the good old-fashioned battery bus switch. It's in the on position. You've also got the generator bus 2 switch. You have the 2 ignition switches here and the fuel boost pump. One of the things that makes this one slightly different is all these switches basically are going to be together, except for these two after we get the thing started. We also have this handy-dandy external power switch. I can go ahead and bop that button right now, and I can actually click off the battery switch to go ahead and kill things. Now, here's where things are going to get a little interesting. If I tap these 2 switches, you'll notice everything powers up. The reason is we have an invisible box, which is basically plugged into our aircraft right now. It's right here. It's one of the new Russian designs that blend in with the snow, so you won't be able to see it, but it's basically providing us with electrical power, meaning that we don't have to worry about, worrying too much about things just dying on us. Gives us plenty of time to go ahead and get everything set up. Of course, we're going to get this big angry warning. We'll go ahead and pop that button a few times to make that out. Next thing we want to take a look at is we're just going to go double check our switches here, and then we're going to double check our handles. Here's our handy dandy little throttle. You can go and play with that one directly. Our engine's cutoff should be pulled all the way to the cutoff position. Our propeller control. Now this one's interesting, and I got this one backwards on the other video. You have to actually make sure this is set full forward if it's cold outside. So let's see, how are we doing for temperature? How are we doing for temperature? I believe the temperature, if I recall correctly, let's go take a look at the wall here. We are pushing, that's not the correct temperature at all. It's definitely not 60 degrees outside. What have they done to us? I hate it when that happens. Let's see, we got a little wind layer down there. We got a wind layer up there. Oh, God, I'm not going to delete that layer or anything like that. Go ahead and push this. There we go. Let me see your temperature. That's not accurate. Let's go ahead and tweak that temperature to make it a little bit more polite here. Oh, it's a different issue. It turns out that the thermometer is simply broken. Oh, well. So we're going to, I know that it is 10 degrees outside, so that's pretty darn cold. So we're going to make sure the blue handle, our propeller handle, is all the way forward in this particular case. Like I said, we're going to go double check that one. A couple switches down here are kind of nice to help us out. Notice our external fuel control. If we had an external fuel pump, we do not have an external fuel tank on this thing, so we don't have to worry about this too much. We have a handy dandy switch for this. Like I said, we're not carrying extra tanks on here, so all this stuff really doesn't do anything special for us. We don't have to worry about it too much. So what we do need to worry about, though, is if we pop over on this side, we've got our panel lights. I don't think I need any of that right now. We have our landing lights, but we want to make sure that our beacon light is definitely turned on here. Now that that sucker's been turned on, we can go ahead and flip on our battery. If we want to start with the battery, we can flip on our generator if we're already starting, but we're not. We're going to get it started and then flip over in a minute. So what I'm going to do is click on the fuel boost pump. That's the first one. I'm going to open up the ignition, and I'm going to open up the starter switches. So here's how this one works. You click the ignition switch, which is going to start a little spark. Then you're going to click on the starter, which is going to get the starting process started. Now, because we are a turboprop, we have to wait until this thing gets turning pretty darn quick before we can actually do anything about it. So you can see my NG is right over here. I'm just going to hold my hand over engine condition. All right, activate the fuel. And go ahead and tap it into its start position. Now notice Microsoft doesn't trust the user with being able to press the switch on time. So because I turned on the fuel at the correct time, the thing fired up at the correct time. Now if I left this fuel off, like it was a moment ago, this thing would automatically have jammed itself into its correct position and off it goes. Looking out the front window, I can see the propeller started pretty well. Absorbing, we're starting to pick up some speed here. ITT is pretty darn cold. Like I said, it's a nice and freezing day out here today, so we're not going to get too carried away. After the engine is started, what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the starter switch and the ignition switch, and we're going to click both of those off. We can leave the ignition switch on if we're concerned about having like a flame out or something during takeoff, but generally we only need to do that in situations when there's a bunch of visual moisture basically getting dumped on our heads here. Next, what I like to do is I like to set up my automatic pilot while everything's warming up here. We're not going to be going up too high today. You can see I'm already at 800 feet, so we'll go up to about 2,500 feet. Now, the autopilot on this thing is a little different. You have the AP itself, but then you have the servos separate from the AP. So what you have to actually do with this one is you have this auto trim. You can flick these switches to the on button. It's not actually going to engage the autopilot until you come down here and actually select your specific modes. Speaking of selecting specific modes, you notice my CDI here is set to VOR1. I'm actually going to press that a couple times to make sure that's set to my GPS course that I've selected already. So now that that's looking pretty good, just double check and make sure everything looks good. Looks good, that looks good, everything looks good, our audio receiver is good. We can now come over here, double check our switches. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on a battery, switch on a generator, which should start on, and I'm going to disconnect the external power. You slap this switch down, you might be a little disappointed, so be careful on that one. I'm going to go ahead and pop on our nav lights real quickly, just to let everybody around us know where they are, and now everything is in great shape. I'm kind of disappointed we don't have external fuel tanks. That'd actually be kind of fun. So looking at this thing now, our engine's running. Everything is looking pretty good. We're ready to go ahead and start taxiing our way over to that beautiful runway there. Now, because everything is absolutely positively covered in snow here, we're going to have to be kind of careful on our little taxiing job. So one of the things I will do here, and this is one of the great things about a G1000, is I can just zoom in and see exactly where I need to go. So it looks to me like I need to turn us around. Alrighty then, let's turn around. So I'm going to disengage the parking brake, which is going to be this little handle right here. Slap that down, and I'm going to put the aircraft into high idle. High idle is just basically going to give us a higher idle, which means that it's going to be able to taxi just without even touching the throttle, which is kind of a nice touch there. I'm going to get this thing rolling here. I love these crisp winter days. This is so nice. Of course, in this part of the world, crisp in winter is whoa. This is extra crisp and extra winter. That's perfectly fine. Taxiing this aircraft is wonderfully, wonderfully straightforward, even though it is a tail-dragging aircraft. Now, the reason it is so straightforward is because the tail drag, what's that? The extra little wheel that kind of chills in the back there, our tail wheel, I should say, there's the word I was looking for, is totally controllable by the rudder pedals. So I can just gently tap the right rudder pedal here, and this thing is just going to scoot right along. Now, the way that the POH describes that particular pedal is, we're actually getting going a little too fast here. I'll go ahead and pull the condition lever back. The way that the POH actually describes it is in the fact that you can actually caster it once it exceeds a certain angle. So in the real world, what you can actually do is approach something that you need to turn on, jam on the brake for that particular side, and then just kick the wheel over, and the thing will go all the way around. You can basically almost do turn in place with this aircraft, which is really impressive. So I'm just kind of rolling along here. Like I said, I'm picking up some pretty good speed here. It is definitely a crisp winter day, for sure. Now, I'm looking at those giant clouds up above me going, oh my, if we were to run into one of those clouds, that would end pretty poorly for us because, of course, what that's going to do is it's going to turn us into a giant ice cube. And I'm not going to worry about that too much. We're going to go ahead and take a midfield takeoff here. One of the reasons I chose this airport is because, like I said, not only is it incredibly remote, but it's actually kind of a neat little airport. Go ahead and tap the brakes here, and we'll go ahead and get ready for takeoff. So getting ready for takeoff in this aircraft is very straightforward. One thing we want to confirm is that our auxiliary boost pump is turned on. Don't touch this by accident. You'll do it 100 times. Coming down here, we want to make sure our landing lights are ready. Now, the landing lights are a little quirky because you actually have up and down, and you have the lights themselves. So what you have to actually do is put the landing lights down. And once the landing lights go down, they're actually going to descend out of the wings. See this little handle that just popped out? To turn the landing lights themselves on, you have to click this switch, and that actually powers up the landing lights so you can see them. So when you're done with the landing lights, you have to shut the landing lights off, and you have to put them away. It's just kind of a neat little, kind of thing that makes this aircraft kind of quirky. But again, I love stuff like that. Next, what we want to do is we want to confirm. Usually people will turn their ignition switch on. Like I said, we're going to double check the fuel boost pump. Looks good. We have nothing external, so I'm not going to worry about that. Anti-ice, I'm not going to worry about that today because everything else is running, and we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and roll ourselves. We'll do our lights, camera, action. Transponder needs to be activated, and we are good to go. That's it. Lights are already set. Action will just be jamming the gas. Go ahead and taxi this thing nice and carefully out onto this lovely runway here. I love these military runways. They're clearly designed for things like MiG-25s. They're not designed for us here in a little teeny tiny PC-6. We're going to put our flaps into the takeoff position. Now, this aircraft, based on what the POH says, you can basically use one set of flaps for takeoff. So we're just going to slap that switch. It's going to go ahead and pop them down. Just going to look out the back here, just confirm that they went down okay. These are not the world's fastest flaps, I should say. All right, everything's good. Give everything a quick little jiggle. Make sure it's feeling pretty good as well. And I'm just checking my controls here. Controls are feeling pretty good. I think I am ready to go. All right, so one last thing I want to check real fast. And like I said, you always want to check real fast, is to disengage the Gust lock. Now, one thing that we could do is there's this little tiny switch down here. You want to hit that one off. Otherwise, you will find that you will not be able to move the stick, which is going to make takeoff much more exciting for you than it probably needs to be in an aircraft like this. A lot of times people pop the Gust lock off at the beginning. Not a bad idea. It's just one of those things that I went through my checklist just to make sure everything made sense. All right, let's do it to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down on the brakes. We're going to smoothly apply power. We're looking for about 40 43 on our torque gauge here. It sounds very similar to another PC aircraft. I think the PC-12 comes to mind. Put it up just a tiny bit. We're on ice here, so it's going to start skidding. 43.7. Actually, sorry, wrong version. 47.3. I knew I'd remember. Looks good. Let's do it. This aircraft does not take much to get airborne. Now, one thing you want to watch out for is when that tail wheel does leave the ground, the entire aircraft has a tendency to skid. So kind of be ready for that. So I'm holding the tail back up. See it? See it? I'm just going to hold the tail back gently, and the aircraft will come popping up on its own when it's ready to fly. It's just kind of a neat, quirky plane here. Now, our initial climb out speed is going to be 65 knots. That gets us going up pretty quick initially. But like I said, there's a bunch of trees at the end. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to go ahead and pop up that notch of flaps. Let the aircraft pick up a little bit of speed here. Pull the throttle back a tiny bit. I think the transient is allowed pretty significantly higher than when I have it. There we go. And we're looking for our VY speed of about 97 knots. I'm doing about 90 now. Looking down below me. Looking pretty good. I kind of swing to the left a little bit here. It's about 93. We're climbing pretty well so far. And there is 97 right there. Perfect. Give myself a tiny bit of up trim. This thing does not need much trim. And we are climbing literally perfectly. What a great plane. At this point, if you did flip on the ignition, you can flip that off after you have reached your cruise altitude. So we're going to go ahead and play with the automatic pilot here. A bunch of different options here. One thing you have to remember, though, is the autopilot doesn't get turned on until you hit that switch. In this case, I'm going to reach over. I'm going to press the navigation button. I'm going to come up here and go click. Now that the autopilot master is on, we can actually do things with it. Now, for example, I'm going to set up my vertical speed. Let's say 500 feet per minute. It's pretty good. We could probably actually do closer to 1,000, but that's fine. We've already preset our altitude. And notice this thing is immediately shooting away on us because of those wonderful new features that decides to add waypoints that don't actually exist. Let the aircraft kind of stabilize itself a tiny bit here, and we can then just sort of enjoy the scenery. Whoa, my gosh. If you were an airplane that went down in these woods, they would take generations to find you. It's just an amazing little kind of thing here. There we go. Got the aircraft a little bit more under control. And you can see the autopilot could be tuned just a tiny bit better here. So our cruise altitude today, like I said, is about 2,500 feet. And we get to enjoy, like I said, the beautiful Kamchatka Peninsula here. Oh, by the way, I should probably turn on the heat here. Uh-oh. That's good enough. Of course, these folks are looking at me like, do we have to fly in the uninsulated metal airplane? I'm like, yeah, you had to fly in the uninsulated metal airplane deal. Nice. All right, we are just leveling off. So the cruise power on this aircraft is relatively unscientific in the sense that all you do is you pull the throttle back until you reach 119 knots. There's really not much else to it. So I'll pull the throttle back to about half here, and that feels about right. Usually it ends up being right around 30-something. 33, 32, somewhere around there. Remember, you're dealing with a turboprop, so the aircraft itself takes a little while to spool up and a little while to kind of spool down. You can see I'm just about 32 on the torque, and you can see I'm doing exactly 118 and a quarter here. I'll give it just a tiny bit more. That's why it's nice when you have a nice sensitive throttle. It makes it much easier to do that. And notice I get the temperature change, but not a torque change, and whoosh, I'm now at my cruise speed. That's really all there is to operating this aircraft for that particular situation. During cruise, things you need to monitor are very, very important. Are going to be our oil temperature. Right now, we're looking at about 30 degrees Celsius, so we don't have to worry about it too much. There's this little handle over here. We can actually, oh, there's the one I was looking for. Oh, so the handle was already pulled out. Okay, so the guy before me forgot to shut these. I'm going to close up the oil cooler here. It definitely doesn't need to be used at this moment. Good, the heat was turned on already. I win. So this one basically is now going to take us over to our destination. I expect the oil to get a little warmer here. The book says you're supposed to keep it within a very, very tight, basically a tolerance here. But in this case, as a flight sim, it's probably not going to be too much of an issue to kind of keep track of. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and skip the trip, so to speak. There should be a little X button. Click X to skip, and we'll see you when we're getting ready for an approach. All right, we've just about reached our destination. Looking at the window real quickly here, you can see the lovely runway. I've gone ahead and flipped on wind mode on the PFD here, and we can see we're going to be doing a left downwind here. Go ahead and disengage the automatic pilot. We're just going to swing to the left here just a little bit and kind of get ourselves all set up. Now, one thing that makes this airplane pretty cool is this is not only a short takeoff, it is also a short landing aircraft. And that is especially true if you have the ability to throw your throttle into reverse. Now, of course, what I have is a little button that you press and hold for reverse, kind of a thing like that. Unfortunately, that will will not work with this airplane. If we really, really wanted to put it in reverse, we'd have to actually bind it so that we could basically flip the thing the whole way around, which is actually kind of disappointing that it's set up that way. But hey, we work with what we got, kind of a thing. So bringing us into a landing pattern here, we just want to double check a couple things. A lot of times we'll go ahead and flip on the ignition just in case we have a flame out, because that would be pretty garbage on landing this particular plane than a flame out, I'm sure, as you'd imagine. Next thing we want to do is we want to double check to make sure our lights are down. We've already set those up for us, and well, we forgot to retract them, which was dumb on my part. But hey, they're down now, so we're good to go. Other than that, we're going to confirm condition is going to be in the high position up there. And we're also going to go ahead and get ourselves all nice and lined up for the runway as always. Pull the throttle back, and we'll go ahead and pop down here. Make sure our propeller is all the way forward. There's not a lot in the manual that talks about what you should be doing with the propeller lever. Most of it is there for the purposes of feathering, more so for the purposes of doing anything aggressive with it for like cruising. You know, again, we're a turboprop. We're not a conventional piston plane here. All right, take a look. I'll go ahead and put myself, we'll lift the nose up just a tiny bit. And we'll go ahead and put that first notch of flaps down once we get to about 90 knots. We're going to go ahead and take a nice little gentle left turn here. A little bit more left foot will help out. Perfect. Wow, I just saw absolute, it's a chaotic Russian driving right there. You can also see my shadow right across the middle of the town. That's super cool. All right, get ourselves into our little left base here. All right, it's pretty good. Bring ourselves around to final in just a moment. Lost a lot of energy in that turn. All right, according to the manual, the approach speed of this aircraft is around 68 knots. Obviously, it's an incredibly cold day outside, so the actual ending airspeed that you might end up with might be a little bit different than 60 knots. Whoop. I'm going to clean up my base leg here a little bit. I turned that one just a little tiny too early. You can see it right over my left wing there. Pull that nose down, let lose a little bit of speed. This is a tail dragger aircraft. I find it's a very, very durable tail dragger aircraft. It will bounce if you come in too fast. Put down our last notch of flaps. Come ripping over the forest here real quick. And we should be fairly well lined up here. Looking good, looking good. About 65 knots, getting a little slow. Let's go ahead and do our compass checks. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, propel, flaps, light speed. All right, delightful. Let's do it. Probably should have brought skis today. A little bit of left foot. Center my view. And down we come. So the way this one works is pretty straightforward. If you want to do a 2-point landing, you got to come in a little fast. If you're looking for the 3-point landing, basically what you're going to do is do your standard approach at 68, pull the throttle back, lift the nose up, and wait for the bump. We'll go ahead and try the 2-pointers today because, you know, why not? I never get to do 2-pointers. One of the tricks to the 2-pointers, by the way, is to trim the nose down before you get down to the ground. So what you're going to end up doing with this landing is basically as you hit the ground, you just release pressure on the stick and it will hold you down. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep our approach speed in. Like I said, we get a little bit of crosswind here. We're basically going to fly the plane down to the ground. Get very close to it. Go ahead and reduce the power just a little bit here. And whoop, whoop, too much. And once we get on the ground, we let the nose come forward. Okay, tap the brakes just a tiny bit. Whoop, catch it, catch it. Had time for lag there, Microsoft. And there we are. We'll let the tail settle. Get on the brakes. Success. Perfect. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Okay, so now the interesting thing is, if you remember I closed the oil cooler, we gained a whopping 4 degrees the entire flight. I guess that's the advantage to flying when it's below freezing. So hopefully this video helps you out. Now, this is definitely a super cool plane. This one is nice because it does have the automatic pilot on it. It has slightly more modern avionics. The only downside to it is it's got all that stuff. Big thing you got to remember is when you're climbing, you're looking for about 97 knots. When you're approaching, you're looking for about 68 knots. And of course, when you do go to land this one, if you leave the power in, you can put it on 2 wheels. If you cut the power early, you can kind of land it on 3 wheels. Other than that, enjoy.